Before we begin, tell me where in the world are you watching from? Drop the name of your town or country in the comments. I love knowing how far these Wild West stories travel. The poker game reached its last breath when West and Harlow placed their closing cards. Beyond the saloon walls, rain tapped muted knuckles on the panes, and thunder murmured like a distant argument behind the ridge. The lantern flames wavered like they paid attention too. He avoided gambling by nature. But that night, a sensation tugged him from his homestead to town, like an invisible wire anchored inside his ribcage. A hollow pull lacking description. 5 men surrounded the table, dense smoke twisting upward, liquor scent sharp in the air, but it was the young woman in the shadowed corner that disturbed his focus. She sat instead of stood, posture trained once for pride, and now barely holding its remains. Red hair twisted messy, fabric faded to an old shade of green, hemline frayed, travel soaked into every thread. Her wrist carried a tired ribbon bleached from red to a dry iron rest tone. "She ain't claimed by me," said the county lawman, drink spinning in his grip. "But she's included in the wager sum." Irish speech soft like sacred verses, claws quick as a feral cat at provocation, and none challenged the rule. Mercy's hollow rarely weighed fairness heavier than owed accounts and nightly debt. Weston held his hand, matched set of high cards, kings ruling sevens beneath, eyes lifting toward her again. She refused eye contact, gaze fixed on a deserted glass, lips tightened firm, jaw raised, silent resistance in a hall that offered no refuge. He lowered the cards slowly. A silence collected thin as stretched rope under pressure. A voice exhaled low disbelief. The lawman gave one slow nod, empty bottom of the glass following his agreement, then faced her direction. "Stand now, Bridget. Harlow carries your naming rights tonight." She stepped up quiet, a drifting figure, soles bare, ribbon wrists vibrating with contained fear as she moved past Weston. He allowed no touch, minimal glance spared under a lowered brim. She trailed behind him as he exited, rain steam and hoof prints marking their departure. They mounted horses without words. Path chosen without clarity, outcome feared more in stillness than movement. Bridget clasped her upper arms to herself, rain soaking down to bone. Eyes jumping like a deer sensing threat, unsure of the route he carved forward, but terrified of motionless endings. He gave her the blanket from his saddle, but didn't offer to help her drape it. When she leaned too far and nearly fell, he steadied her with one large hand and said nothing. They reached his cabin near dawn, tucked against a hill, with smoke curling faint from the chimney. A tired, lonesome thing built with thick logs and stubbornness. She stayed on the porch while he lit the stove inside. She didn't knock, didn't step in. He opened the door wider and left it like that. Bridge entered only when the wind grew sharp enough to sting her cheeks. Her wet dress clung to her, and her boots left small puddles across his floor. "I don't belong to you," she said, barely audible. Wesson didn't lift his eyes from the stove. "Didn't say you did. He set a tin bowl of stew on the table." She stared at it like it might be laced with something cruel. Then slowly she sat, ate without comment, every gesture tight with mistrust. Her eyes never left him as he moved. He slept the chair that night. She curled by the fire on the rug, arms wrapped around her ribs like armor. Her body trembled under the blanket he gave her, and yet she never made a sound. He watched the firelight flicker across her face until the flames sank into ash. By morning, she was still there, still curled, still silent. He handed her coffee. She accepted it like someone and used to kindness like it might come at a cost. Outside, the wind had stilled, and the first weak light of morning softened the hills. He went to tend the horses. When he came back, she was hanging a wet dress on the porch rail, bare arms pink from cold. He cleared his throat. "There's a coat in the back room." She hesitated, then nodded. That nod stayed with him all day. He didn't speak much, but he noticed everything. How she flinched at door slams, how she refused to sit at the table when he did. How her fingers moved like someone who'd once played piano, though they shook now with every movement. When she asked to sweep the cabin, he didn't stop her. Just handed her the broom and returned to carving fence posts in silence. Town folks noticed too. They always did. When he brought her along to the supply store, heads turned. Whispers slid like dust under the floorboards. "That's the poker girl. Imported trouble. She'll rob them blind." Pretty for trash. Bridget heard them. He saw it in how her back stiffened. That night, she stood outside on the porch long after supper, staring at the dark. He stood behind her, quiet as snow. They talk like I'm a thing, she whispered. They talk because they're bored, he replied. She didn't answer. The wind picked up, rattling the shutters. He fixed them the next day. She began humming to herself when she washed dishes. Nothing loud, just a trace of a song in another tongue. He didn't ask what it meant, just listened from the barn. And something softened inside him he didn't know was still there. One day, she found a sprig of lavender by her plate. She didn't ask if it was from him. He didn't say, but she smiled for the first time in front of him. It didn't last. That night, someone threw a rock at the cabin window. Shattered glass and silence followed. When Weston ran outside, he found nothing but boot prints and laughter disappearing into the trees. She was curled in the corner, hands over her ears. He sat beside her, not touching, not speaking, just stayed. The next morning, he fixed the window. She made 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. He handed her a pair of boots she hadn't dared ask for. She'd been wearing the same torn pair since the saloon. She blinked at them like a miracle, then placed her hand gently on his arm in thanks. That night, a storm came. Hard rain, sharp winds, sharp winds. She woke in the dark with a scream caught in her throat. He met her in the hallway, his lamp already lit. Without a word, he guided her to the hearth and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She reached for his hand and didn't let go. It was the first time she touched him by choice. He never asked where she came from, what the marshal had meant when he called her feral. But one night, as they sat beside the fire, she spoke. I came on a ship, she murmured. My brother died before the first snowfall. I worked scrubbing floors, got tricked into a deal I didn't understand. Debt they said I owed. Then Coyle won me from a man who owed him worse. I think he just liked the sound of owning something. Weston looked at her, eyes steady. You're not something. No, she whispered. But I felt like it. They sat in silence. Then quietly she asked, why did you play? He hesitated at the thought's sake. Burlington. I hadn't spoken to another soul in 5 months. The house felt like it was forgetting my voice. She nodded. It's strange how quiet can start to hurt. They shared the silence after that, but it felt different until the marshal returned. It was just past noon, the sun bright and sharp. When one stepped outside and saw 3 horses riding up the hill, Bridget stood by the laundry line, her hands frozen in mid-pin. Marshal Coyle dismounted, smug as ever. His 2 companions looked like the kind of men who like to laugh at cruelty. Evening creed, he stopped. Harlow, right? Weston didn't reply. I figure I've come to collect. That girl was a bluff, nothing binding, just a little fun. You understand? Coyle narrowed his eye. You forget who keeps the law in this town. I didn't forget, Weston said, stepping forward. I stopped caring. The marshal reached for his sidearm. Weston didn't flinch, just stood still. Bridge stepped beside him, chin high. She stays, Weston said. And if I say different, Bridge answered for him. Then you'll have to drag me and I will scream. Coyle froze, looked from her to Weston, weighed something in his mind. Then he spat, turned, and rode off. When the dust settled, Bridget turned to Weston, breath shaking. You didn't have to do that. I did. You could have lost everything. He met her eyes. Not everything. She stepped close. You didn't win me in a game. No, he said, but I found you there. She smiled then, trembling and wide, like spring thawing through frost, and he touched her face for the first time. The next morning, she was barefoot in the grass, washing clothes in the stream. Bridget Harlow, he said softly behind her, testing the sound. She turned. You didn't ask. I'm asking now. She laughed once, sharp and sudden, then nodded. He pulled a small band from his pocket, twisted from wire, and hammered into a circle. A ring made not for show, but for staying. She slid it on her own finger, hands shaking. I ain't owned, she whispered. You never were, he answered. And with that, they walked back up the hill, 2 people who hadn't been looking for love, but had found something steadier. Sometimes the wildest winds ain't made at the table, but by what a man refuses to fold on. If this story stirred something in your heart, leave a word for Bridget or Weston or for the kind of quiet strength this world needs more of. And if you believe in love that grows slow and stays sure, don't just write off, share it. Someone out there needs a story like Goulet.